Well, here we are. It is Friday, May 26, 2023, and this is the weekly video. As you all know, and I say it every week, we do these each Friday. Get caught up in what's been happening in auctions over on eBay, live auctioneers, Christie's, Sotheby's, Bonhams, the major auction houses in Europe, and that kind of thing. So just keep an eye on what's happening around the world and Asian art in particular, of course. And then this week, there's some interesting things to talk about. One of the things I wanted to mention too was that on the global pages, we've added the Bonham sale that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Some nice looking things in there. Do check it out. And last week we talked about the Christie sale that's coming up in Hong Kong. Also, as always, as you'd expect, some really nice things. And certainly, even if you're not going to go or even if you're not going to participate in the auction, I always urge people, go look at the pieces, study the pieces. You can learn from this. It gives you a very good sense of what the things are. The descriptions are generally excellent. And I would recommend to everybody that if you're interested in Chinese art, follow all spectrums of the market from the top to the bottom, because we all collect in different areas. We all have different areas of interest, and it's good to stay informed, as they say. All right. And a couple of things I want to go over quickly at the very beginning here regarding the global pages. There's a couple of nice auctions that have turned up. We mentioned it last week. Oak Ridge has the huge number of silks that are coming in on about 8 days from now, 9 days out. So you have plenty of time to check that out. And this is at Heritage. And I don't know if any of you saw this, but always check Heritage out for sales for things, because they're down in the Texas area and they get some really interesting things. And one of them is this pair of lacquered food dogs. They're Chinese wood, carved wood with these food lions on it. And it's interesting because this pair of food lions are very, very similar in their carving style to the famous pair of stone food lions that are at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. Those giant, if you've ever been in there, they're enormous. They're 5 or 6 feet tall. They're huge pieces of stone and carved almost identically to these. But these are nice. They've been made into tables, which I think is sort of, I don't know if I like the idea of them being tables. I think if I owned these, I'd strip the table off and just put them back to being nice sculptures. But this is a good-looking pair, and they're fairly good size. They're 24 inches tall or so, and they have a very modest estimate of $1,200 to $1,800, opening bid of $600. I would look into these. If you like carvings, these are pretty nice. And also at Leland Little has got a sale coming up. They've got a few Chinese things in it, not many this time around, but one of them is this summer robe. It's on gauze. Typically these are on fine silk, but they also made them for summer wearing to keep a little bit cooler. And this is a really nice looking robe, beautiful condition, and it's a 19th century example, probably mid 19th century or so. But beautiful quality, nicely done all the way around, good gilding on the dragons. And it's estimated at $3,000 to $6,000. It's already up to $5,500, and it's probably going to bring more. I suspect this will bring somewhere between $7,500 and $10,000. But if you're a robe buyer, you know what this is. It's a good one. It's a good looking one. All right, and then hopping over, this is also at Leland Little. If you like China trade items, this is quite a good item. And this Leland Little is located in Hillsborough, North Carolina. This is a really nice China trade floor screen. And it measures about 6'8" in height and is 84 inches in width when it's all together. Each panel is 22 inches. So it's basically 6'8" by 7 feet in width. But this is a nice Chinese export example. This is not a 1950s copy. Here's a close-up of it. This is a mid-19th century screen, or just slightly maybe first half of the 19th century. Has the same type of lacquer that we see on tea caddies fairly often. And this is an entire screen of it. And the screen is in good shape. That's the thing that I sometimes we don't mention the screens because they're sort of train wrecks as far as their physical condition goes. This one has obviously been unhinged. The hinges have been taken apart, and they've applied these sort of Ruyi head type hangers, probably hanging in a living room or a dining room or a hallway or something. I would put it back as a screen, I suspect, or at least, well, maybe not. Maybe hang it that way. It's not a bad idea, but I like the serpentine effect of screens when they're opened up. I think they look nice. But this is a good looking screen, and they do show a lot of details of it around the edges and so forth. The kid, and so there's a few minor little imperfections, and then in the back of it, of course, is a much simpler bit of decoration of these trees coming up on it, which is not unusual. That's typically how they did them, or some other minor bit of decoration. The estimate is $1,000 to $1,500. There's one bid at $500 right now. The estimate is very reasonable. Don't be surprised if it goes. If you've been looking for a great screen to put in your house or something really nice, plan on spending maybe $3,000 to try to get it that way, because they don't turn up very often, and they don't turn up very often in good condition. So something worth keeping in mind. And this is at William Smith's up in New Hampshire. Is coming up. I saw this week. We added it to the global pages. There's a bunch of stuff in the sale, but this is just one of the items. Is a really interesting 18th or early 19th century brush pot with gold bamboo. This is a really unusual little brush pot with a spotted deer. If you're a Scholar's object collector, pay attention to this. This is a very attractive brush pot, and the gilded bamboo trees are quite unusual and beautifully done. Beautiful enamels. This looks to be a piece made either during the late 18th, but probably early 19th century, judging by the overall decoration and style of the pot. But it's a good one. The estimate is $300 to $500, which I think is low. If you're a serious buyer for this kind of stuff, be willing to throw $800 or $1,000 at it to try to get it. Because if you've been collecting brush pots for any length of time, you're going to say, gee, I haven't seen one like that before. No, you probably haven't. We've seen a couple somewhat similar over the years, but not many. And this is one of the nicest ones we've seen. So the opening bid, of course, right now is at $200 to get 3 bids. I don't know if this is on Invaluable as well. There may be competing bids over there, as there often are. And just a little tip, if you're looking at something in Live Auctioneers and you see it's got a bid or two and you think, okay, I'm in the range, always check Invaluable, because they could have a competing bid much higher than the bid you're looking at on Live Auctioneers. The two sites don't link their bids, so it can be a little bit discouraging. I had somebody get a hold of me and they said, well, the bidding was only up to $400 on Live Auctioneers, and I put it a bid of $500 and the thing opened at $1,000. And I told the guy, I said, it probably because it had a bigger bid over on Invaluable. All right, there's a lot of overlap between Invaluable and Live Auctioneers. We include Live Auctioneers on the global pages mostly because they are much more willing to have us link to them. Invaluable doesn't want us linking to their site for some reason. They don't want anybody linking to their site, and they make it almost impossible to do so. They really do. They seem to be fighting it. I don't know why they're not doing their customer. If you're an auctioneer, by the way, and you advertise on Invaluable, you should talk to them about it because they're hurting their customers by not allowing sites like ours, and there are other sites around the world too that will throw a link on for them. And in our case, we want to display the items, and the software we have, they block it. So we can't share the images. Live Auctioneers has always been very open to it, and that's why we often talk about them more than we talk about Invaluable, for that very reason. All right, and now other things that happened this week. This was the Bronx sale, and I know a number of you were participating in chasing things in the sale because we got a lot of auction preview inquiries about it over on Bidamount. People asking us what we thought of certain things. And there were some really choice armorial pieces in the sale, as you can see. Some very fine examples, and many of them came from prominent English dealers over the years and so forth, but some superb examples. And as you can see, there was a lot of them. There was a huge amount. And there were some good buys, really good buys, like this export salt cellar, armorial salt cellar, from the 18th century, went for only $100. And this is one of the reasons I encourage people to subscribe to the global pages for that reason, is that you see stuff you might not see otherwise. And this very nice little export tea caddy, armorial, again, $150. There were some good buys. Some of the prices were strong, though. I'm not saying that it was a bargain basement deal, but in all of these sales, when you have large quantities of similar items, you're going to have things that go through the cracks. And if you're a competitive bidder and you like to buy things, but you maybe don't want to spend the entire budget on one or two items, on a sale like this, you can go through and just leave lots of bids. And I've said it for years. Leave a bid. You can't get anything unless you leave a bid. And there were some very good buys in here. There were some medium to fairly strong prices too, but there were also some great buys. And sometimes it's just because people in the room, people that are online, they pause for a second, they're distracted, they go to get a sandwich, and the item sells. And this is when dealers swoop in and get themselves a good buy, because they usually have the discipline to hang around. And this was a wonderful teapot. I mentioned it last week. It was estimated at $800 to $1,200, which I thought was very low, and suggested it would probably bring $1,500, I think, to $2,000, and it brought $2,000 plus the premium. But this is a very fine example. With the arms, Lestevennen is one of the. It's in Howard's book. You can look it up. But a very nice, very rare export teapot from the 18th century, probably Yongchen period. Beautifully done. They have it dated circa 1755, which would be Qianlong, but the quality of the work looks Yongchen to me. But they may have documents that it was made just slightly after the end of the Yongchen period, which would be 1755, just within 10 years. But a beautiful, beautiful piece of porcelain. And then this, one of these elephant dishes. This is a fairly well-known type, and it's got this white enameling around it, like pat sur pat, as they refer to it in Europe. With the fellow riding the elephant. These are very collectible. People love these. They're interesting, and the quality is always very, very good. This one was beautifully done. And I think somebody got a great buy on this, because some of you that have been watching the channel for a while will know that a couple of years ago, one of these came up, and as I recall, it brought about $1,600 or $1,700, and it was basically the same size, same plate, but somebody picked up a great buy. And this was a nice one. 9 3/8 inches, standard size. It wasn't particularly small. And overall, good condition. The biggest issue, they said, was some surface dirt, which of course can clean off. And this was one of the other bargains of the week. Another thing that was on the global pages. This was Fortune Auction Gallery in Plano, Texas. And they get pretty good export pieces from time to time. And this was a nice 11.5 inch, almost a 12-inch 18th century export bowl. And it's got gilding around it and famille rose enamels. And it's not a very, very high-end bowl. This is sort of a commercial type that they produced for the export market, but nicely decorated, and had a few bits of wear and so forth. I think there was a line in the body, but that's not a deal killer. But somebody bought this. It had a $1,000 to $2,000 estimate, and somebody picked it up for $50 on a single. It looks like a single bid of $50, and that was it. That was a good buy, because these bowls, even with a hairline in them, in this size at 12 inches, they usually sell for around $300 to $400, somewhere in there. So somebody got a heck of a good buy. And it was all because somebody probably saw the hairlines, and it's in Texas and so forth. But not a bad buy at all. All right, and then hopping over to eBay, there's some good things on eBay this week. As many of you know, Josh Chamberlain, who sells under the name Juice1499, he's a dealer up in New Hampshire. I've known Josh for over 20 years. Had a pretty good sale up with a bunch of jades and a bunch of export wares. He's quite good on export wares. He knows a lot about them. That's sort of how he got into the business, was handling very fine China trade items. And this is years ago. That's how he got into the business. Now he handles everything. But there was this grisaille decorated with red enamels and gilding of the European woman. This is a type we've seen before with the Dutch ships in the background and so forth, made in the 18th century. Went for $462, which was a perfectly reasonable price for that. We've seen them sell for more. Sometimes they bring $600. Sometimes they bring $650. This one brought $462 for some reason, so a particularly good buy. This was a great buy. Many of you recognize this. This is one of those shell form 18th century blue and white dishes. They were done fairly often, and most of the time when you find them, the backs of them are unglazed. It's just raw biscuit showing. This one was fully glazed on the back, which makes it very unusual. Among this class of porcelain. You don't see them with glazed backs and decorated very often. And the artwork on it was particularly good. The artwork on this was very, very nice. Very crisp, very clean, very well decorated. And the bowl was in great condition. And somebody picked this up for $168. And if you had asked me what I thought it should have brought, I would have said probably $350. $3 to $350, somewhere in that range. And this is better than the typical one that you see, much better. And somebody bought it for only $168. And this was a seller in Cheshire, Connecticut, Decor Arts LLC. They sell quite a bit on eBay, and they handle a lot of Chinese stuff from time to time. And this was a nice piece, and they do good photography, which makes me pay more attention because you can really see what there is they're selling. And that was a nice piece. That was a good piece for the export market. And then this. Now this plate was listed as Chinese Qing Dynasty blue and white porcelain plate. And those of you that have been watching for any length of time or follow this stuff know right away that this is not a Chinese plate. This is a Japanese plate. It's a very nice piece of 18th century blue and white Arita ware. And I think this was one of the nice. It was pretty good size too. It was what was it, 12? Or 14 inches, 35 centimeters, so about 14 inches in diameter, sort of a big plate, beautifully decorated, has the pretty typical back that you see on these, the Chanhua mark. The Chinese had a big influence on the Arita kilns, and when the Japanese began producing their porcelains, and they got sort of into high gear in the 18th century, they frequently used Chanhua marks. So often you'll see these Japanese pieces listed as Chinese because they've looked up the mark and they go, oh, it's a Chinese mark, it must be from China. It isn't. It's just, this is something that the Japanese did. It's a quirk in their manufacturing. And you notice the spur marks and the single blue line around the outside. And as we've said many times, when you see that single blue line out close to the foot rim, and especially coupled with spur marks, there's no doubt that it's Japanese. 99.9% of the time. I can't say 100% of the time because there are always some oddball exception. But this was a beautiful piece of Japanese Arita ware, and I hope one of you bought it, because I think because they mislabeled it as Chinese, it didn't get the interest it would have had they listed it properly. Because a Chinese buyer is going to look at this and say, well, it's not Chinese, I'm not going to chase it. And the Japanese buyers, because it was listed as Chinese, aren't even going to find it in the searches. We found it, but that doesn't mean many people did. And I think it went very reasonably. I think it went cheap. $203. That was one of the bargains of the week. And this was from a seller I'm not that familiar with. They're in New Jersey. Dindin 2013. They've been on eBay apparently since 2013. But this was a beautiful piece of Japanese Arita ware. Absolutely great piece. And then back to Chamberlain, Josh Chamberlain. He had this very nice rose canton heavily gilded tureen and tray. The tray looked like it was in good shape. The tureen was in good shape. This was a nice set. Absolutely beautiful. Probably made around 1840 or so, and it went for only $370, which I think was a very, very good buy for one in this condition of that quality. There are lots of these tureens can sell for high and low. They're all over the place at times, and it's always based on the age and the quality. And the ones that are pre-1850 are always, as a rule, always worth more than the later examples. Even if it's only by 10 years. This was a really nice tureen, and I think somebody got a steal on that. If you're looking for tureens, you buy them on eBay. You can buy them on eBay, that's for sure. And then this unusual plate. This did very well because the decoration was unusual. This particular design with the European figures were often done in grisaille only. And here is one done with a puce, cartouches running around the outside, gilding, black enamel with the diaper pattern, and then the European figures beautifully enameled in the center. Here's the back of the plate. It's a nice 18th century plate, and it brought $1,625, which is mainly because of I think it's suspected because of the coloration, because the pattern just in grisaille of this plate usually sell for around $500 to $700, somewhere in there. This one brought $1,000 extra because of the coloring, and that's why maybe some of you are scratching your head saying, I have a plate that looks like that, or I've seen plates like that, and that's not what they usually bring. Well, changes in color can have a huge impact. And also, you'll notice the enamels were in great condition. You don't see any wear. You don't see chipping to the blue area there, the red area. The trees are in good shape. There's a tiny bit of rubbing up here at the top on those enamels there, but that's it. That's it. The rest of the plate was absolutely beautiful. All right, and then over here to this was that jade, probably the head off a rouge scepter. But a very nicely done bit of jade. There was apparently some documents with it, some catalog listings and so forth. There it is, mutton fat jade, flower, lotus blossoms. This must be an old auction write-up because there was no date applied to it. But this was a nice, probably 18th century one or early 19th century. And it did quite well. It brought $3,138, but very crisply carved. The carving on this was really crisp. Look at that lotus bud right there. Beautifully done, very three-dimensional, and it needs a cleaning. This is a really dirty piece of jade. Josh didn't clean it for some reason. I don't know why, but maybe sometimes people like to see them how they come in, and this is what they can often look like when they come out of old estates. But it was a nice example. Good on him for finding that. And then over to this. This was another item that again slipped through the cracks because people didn't leave a bid on it. This was an 18th century blue and white Chinese plate, 9 inches or so in diameter. It was in very good condition, as I recall. I think it did have a slight, just had a tiny chip out of the rim somewhere, a nick out of the rim, as I recall. It was something very minor. And let me see if we can find it. There was a nick small in the rim. It's very hard to see. Maybe that's it up there at the top. Any rate, somebody picked this plate up for $69. It was being sold by a dealer over in the UK in London. That was a good buy, even with the shipping. It says may not ship to the United States. Usually ends up in there just because the seller forgot to click off a box. And if you see may not ship to the United States, don't walk away from it. Send the guy an email and say, I live in the U.S. If I buy this, are you going to ship? Will you be willing to ship it to me? And I'll tell you that 9 times out of 10 they'll say, of course, it's fine. They just didn't check the box when they were filling out their stuff. I can't repeat often enough how important it is when you're selling stuff on eBay to fill out everything that they give you and read everything carefully and make sure you're not doing anything that will, in your listings, once they're up, discourage bidders. And this may be what happened. Bidders in America said, well, he doesn't ship to the U.S., so I'm not going to even try. And take the time to email them and find out, because there's a good chance that somebody in America bought that dish for $69, which is a great buy. All right, and then now over to this, the acrobats. One of you folks out there bought this. I got an email from him this week. You want to know what I thought of it? I love these acrobat plates. These are very unusual, very interesting. This particular one was made in the first half of the 19th century. It's this border pattern on here. You often see on ex-China trade wares that were done during that period for the Middle Eastern market in particular. This was one of the border patterns that they often selected, and then they would add some Arabic to it. But this one has Chinese acrobats. And there's a guy here with a little drum. There's another guy here waving him on, and he's up there with the balance pole. That's just an interesting, charming thing. And again, it's a pattern you don't see very often. And I think this was a fairly good buy, $317. I don't think that was a heavy lift for it. It was 8.5 inches in diameter. Overall, it was in good condition. And just an unusual example. And unusual examples are always fun to buy. And then over to this was a blue and white sort of guan type jar. It was a 19th century jar, but beautifully done, and had this nice blue glaze onto it. It looks like it's one of those examples where they would blow the glaze on with a straw. giving it that slightly speckled effect. And then it was decorated very much in sort of in the feeling of the 18th century, with these round cartouches and square cartouches, and then filled in. The potting on this pot was very, very nice. Here's a picture of the bottom, exactly what it should look like, and ended up selling for $1,210. And this one was not enormous, but it wasn't small. It was 11 inches. Says 8 7/8 by 11 inches. So I'm assuming it was probably 8 7/8 inches high and 11 inches wide. I think it's a pretty wide little pot, but with a nice piece of porcelain. Brought a good price, but not an unreasonable price. And then over to these, we talked about these last week, and they were up to $800 or $900 at the end of the week, and they ended up selling. And apparently, the person that bid on them didn't pay his bill because they've been relisted, and they'll be in the newsletter this week because they were at $900. And to me, these things are usually worth $500 to $700 a piece, $500 to $600 a piece, or $1,000 to $1,200. And this one sold exactly for what it should have, $1,075. And the guy didn't pay for it, and it's been relisted. Now I think it's let me see here. I've got it up here. It's been reposted as a buy it now for $975 for both of them. That's a good buy. That's a really good buy. That's $455, $60 a piece plus $100 in shipping. They're located in St. Paul, Minnesota. If you're in St. Paul, you could save yourself $100 by going over and buying it and picking the thing up. But very, very nice piece. And the guy did the right thing by relisting it. And if one of you was interested in it and you got skunked on it, go take a shot at it. There it is. It's up again. All right, and don't think anything's wrong with it because it's been relisted and didn't get paid for. This happens a lot on eBay, unfortunately, and it's mainly because sellers out there, dealers out there, will buy these things and then they'll share the images around among their friends, trying to find a customer before they pay for it. And if they don't have a customer ready for it, they don't buy the item. They don't go through with the transaction, which is not how it's supposed to work. And I've long thought that eBay should boot people off, the minute they don't pay for something. Give them a 30 days or 60-day timeout, and if they do it 2 or 3 times, you kick them off the site forever. All right, and then over to this. This was that very, very pretty first half of the 19th century Famille Rose Canton plate. This was a nice plate, and we talked about it last week because I just the coloring, the decoration was just so good on it. Loved the little 3-legged toad down here at the bottom, which is a symbol for good luck, and the flowers and the butterflies all around it, and that nice gilded background to the rim and so forth. There was apparently a lot of interest in this thing, and but I can see why, because it was all in such good condition. There was nothing to complain about with this. And this ended up selling for $600, which was a strong price. But given the condition of the thing, I don't think it's a bad price at all. And let's see, how big was this? 9 inches or so? 9 3/4 inches, so a little under 10 inches in diameter. They made them occasionally bigger than that, but usually once they get over 12 or 13 inches, they turn them into oblong platters or square platters or rectangular platters or something else. All right, now over to this. This is we already looked at that one. And then this was the other plate that was up. I think this was the same seller. This also was a nice one with the court scene, and again, unusual border with this very, very nice blue outer decoration of dragon heads, but done with a blue enamel. That's not underglazed blue, that's overglazed blue. And it's a very unusual combination. And then you have the lotus and vine decorations underneath against this sort of tan-colored or soft gold background. Really attractive, very, very attractive dish. And there it is. Cartouches with birds in them, the ladies, lots of gilding still in the hair. Again, not a lot of wear to this at all. This was coming from the same seller as the previous one, and this one went for $585. But nice piece of porcelain, and this one was 10 inches in diameter. Again, not a charger, but sort of a bigger table plate, but very nicely done, very, very nicely done. and things that are coming up this week. There's a few things that sort of caught my eye. There's a bunch of things. There's quite a lot of material this week, so check the newsletter page, and y'all know where it is. I assume at this point, if you go to the home page here at Bitamount, click the newsletter page here. It'll bring you over here. And this is what we did. Oh, I meant to ask, leave a comment on this. We were fooling around with the page last weekend, and we changed the format and went to a vertical format, which, because I kind of like the idea because it made the images bigger. So when you're scrolling through, you don't necessarily have to open it up to look at it, but you get a good view of it. And it includes more of the data about what the thing is in many of the listings. Some of the listings don't. This is the difference, incidentally. You'll notice that right here, this has all this information, all the features are showing up in the listing here, and this one doesn't have any. This one doesn't have any. These are people that don't bother to fill out the form on the site. And all of these are searchable. All these little extra bit of under features are the part of the searchability engine for the Cassini program that dictates how eBay works. And here you have this. He's filled out all of it. China, pre-1800, all of this. And then this guy didn't bother to fill out any of it. He didn't fill out any of it. And it may be a helpful indicator to you on which item you may have a better shot at. All right. But all of these areas are filled out and appear. Okay. So if you're not seeing them, you might consider having a closer look. You might find something that's a good buy for you. All right, but let me know if you like the vertical format versus the 3 over. Usually we go 3 across and then down the page, and I thought it would be fun to try it this way. So leave a comment what you think of it. If you prefer the 3 across version, that's fine. We can switch it. It's just a click of a button to make it display that way. But I thought we'd try it this way for a while. And when you come over to the newsletter page, of course, if you haven't subscribed so far, click this. It's free. It just puts you on our mailing list, and we'll let you know each time the page is updated during the course of the day on Friday when we usually do it. All right, and some of the things that we came across this week is this. This is an interesting cup, and that's gold on the bottom half. It's a late 18th century cup with gilding. Gilt buildings, and there's a little bit of his rub down at the bottom, but a very unusual combination. Here's the other side of it. Nice looking cup with a very interesting decoration. I think this is sort of a rare thing. There's a day left to go. It closes on Sunday. It'll be in the newsletter page. And then over to this, they have this. This is a seller over in this is in the UK. He sells Nafisa. Many of you know who he is. He sells a lot on the internet. He's got this flambe decorated vase, and if you noticed it but you didn't take a closer look at it, it's flambe decorated but with enamels on top of it. And this is something they did do during the 19th century. And some people believe that they were redecorated. They added, the flambe vase was made, and then at a later time they added the enamels. All right, so it can make them a little bit of points of confusion for people. This is a good sized one. It's about 15 inches in height. Beautiful flambe glaze, and I like the added enamels. I think it's sort of fun. I think it's clever. And there they all are, white enamels and famille rose and greens and yellows and so forth. Works quite well. I'm not convinced this is a 19th century vase, but I think it's very close to it. I think it's probably an 18th century vase. I think it's probably an early 19th century vase. There's a picture of the base, quite deeply recessed. Has a nice little step on it. Good little bit of iron oxide showing through. There's a tiny bit of glaze that ran over. But it's certainly 18th or early 19th century. It shouldn't make any difference at all. It is not perfect. It has a small chip out of the top. I'll show you where it is. It's been restuck and badly restuck. It should be, if I had this, I'd take it apart and redo it. Hold on, we got to sort of filter through here. I can't get to it. Anyway, there is a photograph of it. I'm not sure where it is on here, but there's a small U-shaped chip out of the top that's been restuck in there. It's not that big. It shouldn't have a big impact. Check the listing out. It's got 6 days, 19 hours to go. It's only up to $1.48. And I'm not sure why, because I think this is a pretty nice vase, even with the chip. The chip could be fixed or just restuck better. And with the chip, it's still a probably $500 to $700 pot anyway. So, go over and leave a bid on. Leave bids. And there's that pair again, the ones that I mentioned earlier that are up for $975. They sold for over $1,000 a week ago, and apparently the buyer didn't pay his bill. And then this is a nice Chinese export tea caddy. The screen we looked at a while ago, that's over on the Leland sale. Here's a box done in the same, almost identical pattern. Very, very similar. And this is more typically how you see them as tea caddies. And it has a pewter liner with probably a jade or some other hardstone handle on it. Assume it's not jade. If it is jade, you got a nice surprise. I suspect it's not. But nicely done pewter top, most probably made in Paktong. I mean in Swato, not in Paktong. Paktong is another type of metal. Anyway, here's the interior. It's got a few bends in it, which is very common in pewter. But nice old tea caddy. And the caddy looks like it's in pretty good condition. A little bit of crackle on this edge. There's a little bit of rubbing on the edges, but nothing too damaged, not any real damage. And the figures are all good and visible still. It's up to $19. It just went up. This has 9 days to go. But get in there and hit it. Put a bid on it. And then this has 5 days to go. It's got one bid. This, of course, is one of these 18th century lotus rim dishes with the interior painting. This is one of the most popular patterns of Chinese export wares there is, and it's one of the most easily recognizable. And they use this pattern in punch bowls. They use them in dishes and bowls, all kinds of things, particularly bowls and plates. But this is a nice looking one. It's got one bid at $490. The last few that we've seen like this sell for in the $500 to $700 range typically. This one is 9 inches in diameter, so that's probably about where it'll end up. So the $490 isn't all the money. This one is in good shape. As I recall, it's got a couple of minor frits out of it, and that's about it. No cracks, chips, or repairs. Clean, in perfect. I don't know why he's calling it in perfect vintage condition. Vintage means it isn't very old. I'm not sure why he put that in there. Vintage means it's 20 or 30 years old. This is obviously an 18th century example, and he said so at the top of the listing. So check that one out. And then the last thing is this very nice piece of Japanese amari, 18th century, nicely done. It is. It's not a small dish. This is a good size one. What is it, 14 or 13 inches? 31 centimeters. So it's about 13 inches in diameter. So it's technically a charger. Nice piece of 18th century amari. Nice underglazed blue decoration. The rest of it looks very, very good. There's the foot on it. That's exactly what the foot should look like. Here's the back of it. It's just a single spur mark on it, which means it was probably fairly heavily potted, so they didn't worry too much about it sagging in the kiln. And there's the famous single blue line and these beautiful sprays of flowers going around the outside, done very much in the same way that the Kangxi examples were done. This is a nice plate. If you like Japanese Arita and Amari wares, especially the 18th century stuff, like the blue and white one we just looked at a minute ago that was listed as Chinese, you might want to go after this. It's got 6 days to go. It's probably a $350, $450 dish. But it's a nice example. And if you like Japanese wares, and of course Japanese things right now are such a relative bargain to the many Chinese things that are being heavily pursued, it's an area worth getting interested in, I think. So do it that way. All right, that's it for the week. Like I said, there was a lot of things happened, a lot of moving parts. The sale coming up over in Hong Kong. At both, there's a Bonham sale and there's a Hong Kong sale for Christie's. Lots of things coming along, and the global pages are pretty full of things right now. So if you're a subscriber, do check that out. And sign up for the eBay thing, for the newsletter page, and all that. Leave a comment. Subscribe here if you haven't so far. We like to see new subscribers come along. It's always fun. And have a wonderful weekend. Memorial Day weekend to all of you and to our friends who've served in the service. I hope you take the day to relax, and maybe some of you will reflect a little bit and think about people in your family have served in the military throughout history. It's an important thing to keep in mind. All right. Enjoy your weekends. It's going to be 80 here on Sunday, and I'm hoping we'll have some people over for a cookout or something. All right. See you all next week. Bye-bye.